Guys, so I am continuing my series on loving the different sun signs, and I am doing Capricorn right now. And I have put out a few cards that I think symbolize Capricorn. Definitely on the left, the major arcana, you have the Devil card. It is associated with the sign of Capricorn. And then in the middle, I picked a card from my new Keepers of the Light Oracle deck, and I picked Ganesh, Lord Ganesh, the elephant, that symbolizes infinite abundance. And I picked this to kind of counter some of the tendency that Capricorn has of thinking in terms of scarcity. And that's what drives Capricorn a lot, is that fear of something not continuing for them along the lines of their prosperity and their career aspirations. And then on the right, I have the Ten of Pentacles. Now, any pentacles is going to be connected to the earth element, but since Capricorn rules the 10th house of career, and that's number 10, I thought of that. It really is a card of family money, and so I think of the idea of being well-bred. This is something that Capricorn, no matter how humble their beginnings, they have a tendency to want to strive into a higher class, social class or economic class. And it's associated with the mountain goat, that their sign, and that goat is always climbing the mountain. And there is a spiritual version of this when you get a very developed Capricorn individual, where they really look at life beyond the material level, or in addition to the material level, and they're able to see that we are here, for the purpose of expansion. And so that can lead them to greater and greater aspirations of a more spiritual nature. And since Capricorn is the last earth sign, there is the wisdom of that element that is present within them. And I have said this on numerous occasions, that I have been surprised at how many gurus, and I was talking about the yogic masters who are born under the sun sign of Capricorn, and then I even thought of somebody like Martin Luther King, who I consider a major spiritual leader, in addition to being a political figure, but a spiritual leader, and also being of that sign. And it's in the highest expression, it's something that is taken, that transcends the self and is done for the benefit of other people. And that is really what I think is the pinnacle of a person's life, is to do something that is not just self-serving. And so there are certainly examples of that with the sign of Capricorn, as there are of other signs, of course. But in any case, I'm doing these videos in addition to, I've been wanting to do things that go into the personality analysis of the different signs. But I really feel that for people who love someone of this sign, or any of these, all the signs, that it's helpful in the sense that you can understand their motivations better. A lot of times, now this will happen primarily, well, I wouldn't say primarily, but a lot of times this happens when you have parent-child relationships, because you can't pick the astrological sign of your child. Maybe you can time your conception, but it's a lot more difficult to, really control that sort of thing. Of course, I suppose you could say the same thing about the person you fall in love with. You can only fall in love with the person that, strikes your fancy in that way, but at least you can say no to a certain person. You can't say no to the child that you create. So a lot of times you will find conflicts between parents who don't understand why their child is the way that they are, and it leads them to be overly harsh and maybe even not accepting of the differences that they have when they, compare them to some of their other children, or just in terms of thinking of themselves and how they relate to life. And I think that if a child is born, a Capricorn child is born to parents who are of the earth or earth or water element, they will tend to understand this child a lot more, because there's a practical approach to life. If, let's say, that you have a parent who's an Aries, and they really believe that life is an adventure, they may get a little bit frustrated, because Capricorn children tend to be very serious. And they, it may even be like a dynamic where the child is, relating to the parent as if they are parenting their parent. And I'm not talking about a situation where the parent is has some kind of addiction. I'm just talking about in general, where the child feels more mature than their parent. And this could happen if the parent is a Sagittarius or an Aries or a Gemini, or let me see what other sign. Some of the air signs and some of the fire signs, because they tend to be a lot less concerned about the future as they are living in the present, okay? And so Capricorn is always thinking about the future. They're always thinking about their own future in terms of their goals, and they're always striving towards their goals, and they can be goal-oriented from a very early age, but they're also thinking in terms of their future security. And they may be the kind of people who, even as children, are, waiting to get married and have families and things like that, because that's just part of the way that this sign operates. They're very much about establishing these sorts of things in their lives. And if they're, being raised around people who are much less concerned with those things, it can create quite a clash. The other thing that I think is important is that if a parent is somebody who is very ambitious, type A personality, that you don't try to ride your Capricorn child too much, because they will naturally be ambitious. You don't have to worry about that, but you should, well, I don't think you should, ride anybody. But this child will feel that sense of pressure, and actually they need the exact opposite. They need somebody who can tell them that they don't have to perform in order to be loved, that they don't have to succeed, achieve anything for the parent to love them, that they will love them no matter what, because they just have that natural tendency. And that's because the ruler is Saturn, to believe that, you earn your approval, you earn everything that comes to you, that nothing can just come to you for no reason. And so that can make them very hard workers and very ambitious and very successful as a result, but not necessarily can allow them to experience unconditional relationships. And so this is where other people come in. If you're the partner of a Capricorn, that you always frame your love for them or your appreciation for them not in the achievements that they have, attained, but their basic self, who they are beyond all of these other things, so that they can get a sense of that. Because I have noted in some of my YouTube readings, and I've had Capricorn people agree, that Capricorn can be a very vulnerable sign. They may have a very tough facade, but underneath there may be a lot of insecurity and a lot of desire for that deep connection with another person, but there's a fear that it can't happen. And I've even noted, and it's not because I have personally seen anyone, well, I think I have seen this also in a Capricorn's life, but the idea of pay to play, so to speak. So a Capricorn person tends to be very frugal with money, tends to be very, economical, let's put it that way. But I feel like their 1 week spot is in love, because if they meet someone that they really care about, they may throw caution to the wind and feel like they have to buy the relationship. I'm not saying that all Capricorns would be like this, but this could possibly be, an Achilles heel of all of the earth signs. Well, I would say especially Taurus and Capricorn. Virgo is kind of analytical in that sense and is not necessarily as vulnerable to that kind of situation, but maybe they are. Maybe they are. And I think it's because of the earth element. The earth element says you have to, that everything has a price, And so if you look at the world that way, then you can transfer that to relationships. And you see these relationships that if you stripped away everything else, it's way too focused on the material. Who's giving what to whom, who gave what kind of a gift, and stuff like that. And it obscures the real feeling that one person has for another. So if you're somebody who loves a Capricorn, make sure that you really frame your adoration for them in terms of other things rather than what they can provide financially, what they have done career-wise, but in terms of their basic goodness. And that would be very fine, very good, The other thing, too, is to realize Capricorn is a cardinal earth sign. So Capricorn is coming to this life with a very pragmatic sense of things. And they don't like to indulge in anything that is not grounded. They're not going to go off on a tangent. They're going to be because of that Saturn influence, they're going to be very organized. They're going to be very, there's going to be a real structure there. Whatever it is that you're talking about. And they may be very regimented. They may, they may like to do things at a certain time. And spontaneity isn't one of their strong suits. So if you're a Sagittarian, if you're a Gemini, if you're like an Aries person, you may feel a great sense of frustration with a sign like Capricorn because you feel that they're too rigid. And you would be right. They are too rigid. That's one of the downsides. And this is the thing I was talking about, this card, the Devil card. One of the things about the Devil card is that there's this temptation. We could call it the temptation of the flesh that is represented by, in organized religion as the archetype of the devil. And this is because it has such a strong pull on us. Now, albeit it's the mundane level, it's not something that can get into the spiritual realm, but a lot of times things present themselves that can be quite alluring. And for Capricorn, it isn't necessarily like it might be with another sign, in the sexual arena, because Capricorn has a sense of duty. And Capricorn, I think, is more family oriented. It's a sign of the father because of Saturn. Saturn is the father. and the 10th house is the father. It's funny, I've heard the 4th house is the father and the 10th is the mother. I just don't believe that. I think it's the 10th house is the father, because the father represents the outer world. The mother is the inner world, the yin versus the yang. So the 10th house, Saturn, the father, that's the head of the family in the traditional sense of things. So Capricorn believes in structures, all kinds of structures, including families. It's not going to do anything to threaten that. So that's not a temptation for most Capricorns. I'm not saying Capricorns never cheat. I'm sure there are people who can tell me their particular horror story if they were with a Capricorn who cheated. That's always possible, especially when you look at individual charts. Someone might have a lot of Gemini or, what have you, and they might not have felt that they were in the proper marriage or something. But in general, that's not the number one threat on the material level with Capricorn. The number one threat is probably a lust for power, but also a lust for status. It's not so much the dollars and cents and having X amount of money in the bank account. It's feeling like they are important, like they have an esteemed position, because the 10th house is at the top of the chart, so it's the place in the world for each sign. Everyone has a 10th house. Not everyone has planets in it, but everybody has a 10th house, and the cusp of the 10th house, the midheaven point, can relate to the kind of career that you eventually get into. But in terms of how your place in the world, that's the 10th house, okay? So for Capricorn, their place in the world is important to them. But in some people, it can become an overweening ambition. And this is where it gets into that temptation, because they can develop a mentality of, success at all costs. Richard Nixon had to resign the United States president in the 1970s due to Watergate, which was a political scandal. And some people say he was entrapped. Okay, but whatever happened, they knew what his vulnerability was as a Capricorn. They might not have known he was a Capricorn, but they knew that he wanted that success, and he was willing to do whatever it took to hold on to that success. So this is one of the areas that Capricorn people can kind of get imbalanced regarding, is that desire to better themselves, better their station in life to the extent where they are willing to compromise their values. And I feel like Capricorn is one of the more principled signs. So it's always a tragedy when somebody goes against their principles. And I'm not sure, I was just thinking about the countries. Every country has a zodiac sign as well. And the United States is a Cancer because is born under the sign of Cancer, July 4th. I believe that England is a Capricorn. I think India is too. Now England and India both have caste systems. So that would make perfect sense. It would be perfect for both of those countries. I'm not sure if I'm correct on that, though. And it just kind of came to my mind, and that's why I brought it up. But that's that mentality. That's the other thing that sometimes Capricorn, especially the shadow side, can tend to pigeonhole people according to their station in life, and not and also be almost social climbers. Leo can be the same way, but not for the same reason. For Capricorn, it's not due to ego, because I feel that Capricorn is one of the more egoless signs, but a certain sense of striving, trying to, it's kind of like the working class mentality, where someone is born of a humble station and they try to constantly better themselves, and then their children try to better themselves. And I actually remember I had a coworker who was a Capricorn, and she was talking to me about her children, and she said to me something along the lines of, and we were both working in a retail environment, and she said something to me about sacrificing for her children. And I am like, I mean, maybe because I'm a Sagittarius, I just totally did not buy into that. And I said, well, where does it end? You know, because she said that's what parents do for their children. See, there's that sense of duty with Capricorn. And I said, but where does it end? Who gets to actually enjoy their lives? Everybody else is sacrificing. And, you know, you could say that's a fire sign's self-centered perspective. But on the other side, you could say that one of the possible faults of Capricorn is the willingness, the all too typical willingness to conform to society and be, because that's their traditional sign. So people tend to believe in some of these ideas of duty and sacrifice. And I mean, I think that they have noble aspects to them, but I also think that it can be almost being on automatic, where you're not thinking about fulfilling your own needs as well. You're just thinking about being the martyr. I just saw this movie that starred Denzel Washington, who happens to be a Capricorn, and it was called Fences, and it's like brilliant. And he, you know, and he really played this, you know, working class man to a T, of like believing that it was his duty to, you know, provide for his family, that was the main thing, and that loving his children wasn't even, you know, had nothing to do with it. It was all about duty. And yet he was really a tortured character. So that's kind of like what can be a problem, is like being too willing to follow this formula and not consider how it may be conflicting with your own aspirations. You know, in other words, sacrifice is wonderful, but it's really not sacrifice if it's something you do willingly. It's just like you doing something. But when you call it sacrifice, there's a feeling of you not getting your needs met at the expense of somebody getting their needs met. And so when a Capricorn person does not question the, you know, the memes of society or the behavior that has come before them, and they just kind of follow, that's when things can create obstacles, because it's not just, I mean, to some degree there may be things that never go out of style, but in another way, when you know, being able to think for yourself and do things that work for you and not conform to society is very important. People that are more traditional will have a feeling that, I mean, I'm not talking about some of the things that are going on today, but the old-fashioned values. They may say that is the best thing. And yeah, some of them may never go out of style, but some of them need to be challenged. And so that's where Capricorn may cling to tradition too much. But Capricorn can be a very funny, in a very dry sort of way, sign, what they call a droll sense of humor, and they can be very responsible and very resourceful, very helpful in terms of other people's lives. They can be very, you know, kind to the people that matter to them, and you know, be very productive too, which is saying something. You know, the way that our society just keeps flowing along, that's because people are actually helping to, you know, keep it going. And so I just wanted to say a few words about Capricorn. Thanks. Bye.